The Danganronpa fanbase isn't too bad when it comes to spreading false and made up information. At the very least, I haven't seen that many strange rumors that don't have any sources to them floating around social media. But there is one that has seemed to stick around for years, despite nobody seeming to know where it actually came from. And that one involves the victim of Chapter 3 in Super Danganronpa 2. I see a lot of people disliking this chapter, sometimes even calling it the worst chapter in the entire franchise. I can agree that it's the least interesting murder in the game, and compared to the others, it feels oddly incomplete and unsatisfying. But at the same time, the worst chapter in the entire franchise? Really? Worse than the otaku falling in love with a laptop? Worse than that creepy incest serial killer plotline? Worse than the motivation minigame? One of the most common criticisms I hear of this chapter is that Hyoko's death was a waste, that she had the potential for character development, and so it was just bad writing to kill her off before we got a chance to see that. And when people discuss that, I often hear someone bring up this myth to try and give an explanation to it. The story of the myth goes that Fuyuhiko was originally planned to be the victim of Chapter 3, but then they decided it would be a bad idea to kill him off because then that would have made Pekko's whole sacrifice for him pointless. And so they quickly shoved in Hyoko in his place, and that's why she dies right as she's about to develop, and they never talk about her murder weapon or include her in the closing argument comic. It sounds pretty feasible, and that's probably why I've seen it spread so far, but
No, that's wrong!
to be fair, like all good rumors, it did start from somewhere, and that's what I'm here to talk about. Because I researched more into it and actually found where this whole thing comes from. The source of it comes from some words by the main scenario writer Kazutaka Kodaka in one of the staff interviews included in the Super Danganronpa 2 setting material collection. Basically, the Danganronpa 2 art book. It was only ever released in Japanese. While the equivalent books for Danganronpa 1 and V3 have had some part of them translated by fans, I really haven't seen attempts at the same thing for the Danganronpa 2 book. See, this is a scan of the page where it comes from, and here's the excerpt that mentions Chapter 3. Let me read roughly what it says. Changing the subject a bit, are there any characters who were supposed to survive but were changed? There were two major changes. First, Saionji was supposed to survive until the end. That was changed after the scenario for Chapter 2 was completed. Originally, Kuzuryu was supposed to become a robot after defending Pekoyama in Chapter 2. However, when I actually wrote the scenario for Chapter 2, it turned out to be more emotional than I had expected. I thought it wouldn't be funny if Kuzuryu came out as a retro-looking robot from this development. Danganronpa does outrageous things, but there is a fine line. Same is true for eroticism. Cute eroticism is fine, but we don't want to make it vulgar. No, I had some kind of line in my mind, and Kazuryu had crossed it, so I decided to not make him a robot. It wouldn't be funny if a girl became a robot, so I decided to make Nidai a robot. Nidai was originally supposed to die in Chapter 3, so I replaced him with Saionji, and Kazuryu, who was supposed to die as a robot, survived till the end. However, because of this, the male to female ratio of the surviving characters changed, and there was only one male in the group. There's a lot to unpack there in that interview, but I think you can immediately tell that the truth of the situation is a bit more complicated than what the rumors say. It wasn't simply that they replaced Fuyuhiko with Hyoko at the last minute. I think the key point to take out of this is that Kodaka was saying that the issue wasn't having Fuyuhiko eventually die, it was turning him into a robot. Because if you make him a robot, you're basically making him the comic relief character. That's what happens to Nekomaru when he becomes the robot in Chapter 4. He has some serious moments, but most of the time he exists for jokes to be made about how absurd the situation is and how unnecessary some of his robot functions Monokuma installed into him seem to be. The same kind of jokes that are later used for Kibo in V3. After having such an emotional class trial between Fuyuhiko and Pekko in Chapter 2, having him return just to become a gag character isn't just wasted potential, it also feels like it would be in poor taste. I think it's easy to imagine people having an issue with that kind of story, and Kodaka definitely had the right idea in changing it. That being said, there are still a few ambiguities left within this bit of interview on exactly how the rewriting process went. Kotaka says Nekomaru was originally supposed to die in Chapter 3, but was that as a victim of Mikan, or from the scene where he saves Akane from Monokuma? Was that in addition to Ibuki, or was there originally only one murder in the chapter? Why was Hyoko picked to replace Nekomaru's death over anyone else in the cast? And why would that lead to only one male in the surviving cast? Does that include Hajime? If it does that mean that Fuyuhiko was still originally planned to die, just not as a robot, but got saved because they wanted a more equal ratio of boys to girls at the end? What about Kazuichi? There aren't any more complete answers to this in the interview because it sounds like a casual roundtable discussion, and they didn't seem to have come into this with any written answers rehearsed. The developers might have even been slightly mistaken in some details, since they're just trusting their memories on how things happened during a long production process. We can't really say with 100% certainty that this was exactly how everything happened. But at the very least, we can be clear that Hyoko wasn't put there last minute to replace Fuyuhiko. And it also probably isn't the reason Chapter 3 feels a little underdeveloped and rushed. Because if these changes in the script mostly revolved around the role and the position of the robot character, then that would imply these same script issues would still be seen in Chapter 4, where the robot is actually there. And I don't get any feeling like that. People really like that chapter and don't seem to think that it got rushed. So that's it from me. I feel like someone had to research this thing because otherwise it's just going to keep being repeated without anyone being able to debunk it with actual evidence. So spread the word around. Maybe send this video to someone if you hear them repeating the rumor. Because someone's got to do it, right?